The air in Black Hollow had an eerie weight to it. The fog rolled in daily, thick and oppressive, swallowing the jagged coastline and the decrepit lighthouse that stood like a sentinel of doom. Harper and I had rented a modest cottage nearby for my research on coastal ecosystems, though I couldn't shake the feeling we were trespassers on cursed ground. Harper adored the beach. Her laughter would echo through the mist, a rare note of joy in the bleakness. One morning, while exploring, she ran toward me, her tiny hands clutching a peculiar seashell. It was unlike any I'd ever seen. Smooth and translucent, glowing faintly with a soft, pulsing light. She grinned as she held it up, but her words chilled me. "Look, Mama." The man in the fog gave it to me. I crouched to her level, brushing strands of hair from her face. "What man, sweetie? There's no one out there." She turned her head toward the swirling mist that concealed the sea. "He's there, watching. He says the shell will keep me safe." I glanced toward the water, my stomach tightening, but saw only the endless fog. Harper was imaginative, I told myself. Kids create stories to entertain themselves. Still, I couldn't shake the unease that settled in my chest. The locals didn't make it any better. They'd warned me to stay away from the lighthouse. The keeper, they said, had been a recluse who went mad years ago. According to legend, he drowned children to placate the sea during fierce storms. His ghost supposedly lingered, drawing the living into his watery grave. I laughed it off at first, but after Harper's strange encounter, I started to listen. That night, Harper was unusually quiet. She clutched the glowing shell, refusing to let it go even as she slept. I watched her for a long time, her small chest rising and falling peacefully, while outside, the fog pressed against the windows like a living thing. The days blurred together, each one darker and stranger. Harper began talking to the man in the fog more frequently. Her tone shifted, less childlike, more solemn. She'd say things like, "He misses his daughter," or "He wants to take me to see the sea." I tried to intervene, but Harper would grow upset whenever I mentioned taking the shell away. The glow seemed to intensify each night, casting an unnatural light in her room. Then the dreams began. I saw the lighthouse, its beam cutting through the fog like an accusatory finger. In my dreams, the light would swing toward our cottage, and Harper's voice would call out to me, distant and filled with dread. "Mama, help me. He's here." I'd wake up drenched in sweat, the echo of her voice ringing in my ears. On the fifth night, the lighthouse shone its beam directly into our cottage for the first time. The light was impossibly bright, slicing to the fog and illuminating every corner of the room. Harper sat up in bed, her eyes wide but unseeing. "He's calling me," she said. "No, Harper," I said, gripping her shoulders. "There's no one there." But she slipped from my grasp, moving with a mechanical precision that terrified me. She clutched the glowing shell, and I could hear whispers now, low and guttural, like the sea itself was speaking. I chased to the beach, the wind howling and rain slashing at my face. The lighthouse beam followed her, guiding her steps toward the water. She walked as if in a trance, the waves lapping at her ankles. I screamed her name, but the whispers grew louder, drowning me out. I waded into the freezing water, grabbing her just as the tide surged around her waist. She turned to me, her face pale and her eyes clouded over with an unnatural gray. "He needs me, Mama," she said, her voice eerily calm. "The sea is angry." "No!" I shouted, wrenching the shell from her grasp. The whispers became a roar, and the fog thickened until I could barely see my own hands. Shapes moved in the mist, twisted, spectral figures reaching out with dripping hands. I stumbled to the rocks, holding the shell above my head. "Take this," I screamed. "Take it and leave us alone." The figures paused, their empty eyes fixed on the glowing shell. I smashed it against the rocks with all my strength. The shell shattered, and a piercing wail erupted, deafening and primal. The fog recoiled as if in pain, pulling back from the shore. The spectral figures dissolved into the air, their cries echoing one last time before silence fell. The lighthouse light flickered and died. The storm abated, the sea growing unnaturally still. I collapsed onto the sand. clutching Harper to my chest. Her breathing was shallow, but she was alive. When her eyes fluttered open, they were clear once more. The next morning, Black Hollow was unrecognizable. The fog was gone, and the lighthouse stood dark and silent, its windows shattered. The townsfolk whispered how the sea had calmed overnight, the waves lapping gently at the shore as if the curse had finally lifted. But there was an unnatural stillness to the town. No birds called, no wind stirred the trees. Even the waves seemed hesitant, as if afraid to break the quiet. Harper and I packed our things and left without looking back. Even now, I can feel the weight of Black Hollow lingering in my mind. The glow of the seashell haunts my dreams, and I wake with the taste of salt on my lips. Harper doesn't talk about the man in the fog anymore, but sometimes, late at night, I see her staring out the window, her expression distant. The curse may be broken, but Black Hollow's silence remains. And in the quiet, I sometimes wonder if the sea is merely waiting for its next offering. I still remember the first time I laid eyes on Red Hollow, a forgotten mining town lost to time and neglect. The desert stretched endlessly around it, sand and scrub blending into the distant horizon. My business partner Greg and I had heard rumors of the place, an untouched plot of land ripe for redevelopment. We saw potential in its desolation, dollar signs glimmering where others only saw ruins. Greg had been the one to suggest we camp out overnight, to get a feel for the place. I thought it unnecessary, but Greg had a way of convincing me, as he often did. So there we were, unpacking gear in a dilapidated saloon, its roof sagging and windows long gone. The air was heavy, carrying the scent of dust and something else I couldn't quite place, like iron or decay. "This place is going to make us rich, Nathan," Greg said, spreading a map on the warped bar counter. His voice was full of that unwavering confidence that always pulled me into his schemes. "Maybe," I replied, staring at the brittle wooden floorboards. The saloon creaked with every gust of wind, almost as if it were groaning in protest. That night, the silence was oppressive. After a small dinner cooked over a camp stove, we sat under the flickering light of a lantern, poring over plans. The map Greg had brought was old, marked with faded lines that once outlined the mine shaft sprawling beneath the town. "Ever heard the stories?" Greg asked, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. "About what?" "The gold buried here. Miners used to say there's a fortune hidden under Red Hollow. Supposedly, they sealed away before the mine collapsed." I scoffed. "That's just folklore. People love a good treasure story." Greg leaned closer. "What if it's true? What if we're sitting on more than just land? Gold, Nathan. Enough to retire 100 times over." "Let it go, Greg," I said, but he didn't. He never could. The whispers started around midnight. I was lying in my sleeping bag, half asleep, when I heard them. Faint, indistinct murmurs just at the edge of perception. I sat up, the hair on my arm standing on end. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. Greg nodded, his eyes wide. Voices. He grabbed a lantern and began scanning the room. I followed the beam of light as it passed over cracked walls and broken furniture. At first, I thought it might be the wind playing tricks, but then the voices grew clearer. "Leave. This is not yours." My throat tightened. The words were distorted, layered, as if spoken by many mouths at once. "Gold," Greg murmured, his face alight with something I couldn't quite understand. Excitement, maybe? Or madness. "They're telling us where it is." "Greg, stop. This isn't right." But he wasn't listening. He dropped to his knees and began prying the floorboards with a crowbar. I tried to stop him, but the look in his eyes was wild, unrecognizable. Splinters flew as he worked, and before long, he uncovered a dark opening beneath the saloon. A tunnel. He didn't hesitate, grabbing the lantern and lowering himself into the abyss. Against my better judgment, I followed. The tunnel was narrow, the walls damp and lined with jagged rock. The air was freezing and carried a stench so foul I had to cover my nose. As we descended deeper, the whispers returned, louder now and angrier. "Greed will destroy you." "Do you hear that, Greg?" I hissed, my voice trembling. "We need to get out of here." But Greg pressed on, his steps quickening. We're close. I can feel it. The tunnel opened into a cavern, its walls shimmering faintly in the lantern's glow. At the center was a pile of rubble, and embedded within it were flecks of gold. Greg let out a triumphant laugh and lunged forward, his hands clawing at the rocks. The cavern responded immediately. The whispers turned to screams, and the ground beneath us shook violently. Shadows coalesced around us, taking form, miners, their faces gaunt and twisted, their eyes burning with fury. They reached for Greg, their hands passing through his body, but leaving him writhing in pain. "Run!" I shouted, grabbing his arm and dragging him back toward the tunnel. He resisted at first, still clutching a handful of gold, but the sight of those ghostly figures finally broke through his greed. We stumbled back to the tunnel, the screams chasing us. When we reached the saloon, I threw myself against the door, but it wouldn't budge. Greg pounded on it, shouting, but the wood held firm. The whispers surrounded us again, a cacophony of rage and sorrow. "This land is cursed. You will pay." The ghostly miners emerged from the shadows, filling the saloon with their dreadful presence. Greg fell to his knees, clutching his head and screaming. I tried to help him, but my own vision blurred, the room spinning around me. The last thing I remember is collapsing to the floor as the whispers consumed everything. I woke up to sunlight streaming through the shattered windows. The saloon was empty, eerily quiet. My head throbbed, and my body felt like it had been through a war. Greg was gone. I stumbled outside, calling his name, but there was no sign of him, only the vast emptiness of Red Hollow. My reflection in the broken glass of a window caught my eye. My hair, once dark, was now completely white. The whispers were gone, but their message was seared into my mind. Greed had led us here, and greed had taken Greg. I made my way back to civilization, leaving Red Hollow behind, but its curse followed me. I couldn't escape the memories, the voices, or the faces of those ghostly miners. Greg was never found. And as for me, well, I'm still haunted by the price we paid that night. A price far greater than gold.